Um, all right, so we are going to go ahead and do another question for Pastor. It's been a while since we've done one. You'll notice our setup is for safe social distancing, trying to stop the spread of COVID-19. We got some hand sanitizer up here, so we're going to try to do the best that we can to bring you this content without infecting other people or each other, because I'm certain he's got it. So this is actually going to be part 3 of a question that we answered the first 2 parts for in our previous videos. The question was, how can we know that God created everything in 6 literal days and that he didn't just cause the Big Bang and then guide evolution? And of course, you addressed the Genesis account of the 6 days of creation, the 7th day of rest, and the Big Bang Theory in our previous 2 videos, so you can go check those out on our Facebook page, FBC Duke. It's Facebook. I think it's Facebook. Search for FBC Duke. You'll find it. And or you can get there. You can check out our website as well for content. And you'll see the third part of this question is that God guides evolution. So you yourself are not an evolutionist, though many Christians are. Would you tell us why you're not?
So there's really many things you could talk about here. I hit 3 things, and I give you an illustration just for brevity, because there's too much to cover. The first is that evolutionists do not have the data that they'd like you to believe they have. And if you sit down and you look at it in their own words, they do not, the information, the data, the evidence just is not there. It is not there. And they latch on to a couple of things, but these things aren't proving evolution. And so I could get into that, but there's just really a lot to cover there for a little video like this. But they don't have the information, number one, that they'd like you to have. The second is that the evidence that we have actually suggests design. And if you look at the way that organisms are, there's everything about them points toward design. And the more you look at it, the more likely design becomes, to the point that one atheist evolutionist actually said that as they study organisms, they have to constantly remind themselves that there is no God, because they look so much as if they've been designed to do what they do. And but the third, and this is the one that I'll give you, is that it doesn't make logical sense. Evolution doesn't make logical sense, and it really creates a philosophical paradox that an evolutionist can't get out of. And the paradox is this, is that evolution actually comes from a worldview. It comes from a worldview called naturalism. And the worldview says that it's not possible for God to exist, and the only things in the world come about naturally. And so it's not that they start with evidence and they came up with the idea of evolution. They started with the idea of evolution, and then they picked at evidence so they could make it look like it was true. And that worldview is called naturalism. And there's a huge problem with naturalism. And there was an argument made by a guy named Richard Taylor, and it goes like this. So imagine you were riding a train, and you're looking out the window, and the train, it goes past a sign made out of stones, and the stones say, "Welcome to Oklahoma City." Well, I could believe a couple of things. I could believe that sign was designed, or I could believe that sign came about by random chance. Now, it's not impossible that the sign would come about by random chance. It's maybe there was an earthquake and then the rocks rolled together and it said, "Welcome to Oklahoma City." But I'm making a big dedication if I say that it came by random chance, because if I also, then I have to decide if I'm going to also believe that I'm actually entering Oklahoma City. Because if that sign is communicating a coherent thought, then it completely changes what I believe about it. Because if I'm actually entering in Oklahoma City, there's no way that sign came about by random chance. It would become astronomically illogical to believe that I'm actually entering, that this sign is actually saying the same thing that's actually happening and happened by a total random chance. And the same thing is true with our minds, and our minds in particular. If I believe that my mind came about by total random chance, and it just total series of millions of years of mutations, there's no way that my brain is also trustworthy. It just came about by random chance, like the rocks did on the side of the hill. But if I believe my brain is trustworthy, then I also have to believe that it was designed. Just like if the sign that says "Welcome to Oklahoma City" is actually true, then obviously a city worker built the sign, right? Well, this puts a naturalist in a very tough, an evolutionist in a very hard situation. Because if he says that his brain came about by random chance, it was not designed, then his brain's not trustworthy. And he has to admit that his brain's not trustworthy, which kind of knocks him out of the debate, doesn't it? If his own brain isn't trustworthy, then we can't trust anything that he says. Or number two, we can say that his brain is trustworthy. But if his brain is trustworthy and it can be believed, then there's no way that it wasn't designed. And so he's kind of stuck in this little cycle here, this paradox, where there's no way for him to get around it. And the point is that evolution does not make any sense of real life, of reality, of the way that we are, of the way that our minds work, or the way that our world works. Everything is so obviously designed that we kind of take it for granted. But if you stop and you don't take it for granted, and you really question it, there's no way that it couldn't be designed. There's no way. So,
right. I've heard arguments along the same lines. Sometimes people saying, if my thoughts are just chemical reactions, random chemical reactions, or firing of electrons, then what makes my thoughts have value?
yeah.
Or, as that argument puts it, what makes them trustworthy?
Yeah.
What makes one person's view or opinion more trustworthy than another if it's just
Mutations
this
and
natural
chance and
thing, So that's interesting. It's a very philosophical approach
yes.
to the idea, and of course there is
evidential approaches, and there's a lot more arguments out there. That's just one. So if you have more questions about evolution, I can give more answers. But like I said, there is a laundry list of arguments.
And of course, if someone is not convinced by the arguments that you bring or other people who are not evolutionists, should that cause them to leave the faith?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely not. And the reason I say that is this, and is that proving that evolution were true, even if you did that, and no one has. But if you were to prove that evolution were true, you would not prove that God didn't exist. And I run into people all the time that tell me that they don't believe in God because they realized evolution was true. And that's ludicrous. Proving that evolution is true would only change the way that we interpret the first couple chapters of the Bible. It would not prove that God wasn't real. It would not prove that Christianity wasn't true. It would create maybe some different ways of thinking about theology, but it would not prove that God wasn't real. And so even if evolution were true, it's not a good argument against the existence of God.
All right. Well, that's good. I hope that's encouraging for some people who may be thinking about these sorts of things. And I hope you got a little more idea of some of the thoughts around evolution and naturalism, and this idea of worldviews. Really start to wrap your mind around that we all have a worldview. So keep that in mind. All right. We'll look forward to seeing you in our next video. We might even be wearing the same clothes. That felt very brief. Even with all that extra stuff at the end, it was 8 minutes, 57 seconds.